The smell of his mother's cooking was the first thing that seemed wrong. I noticed it the moment I walked through the front door of our apartment that Thursday evening, the specific heavy sweetness of a dish I did not recognize, not the clean, cold air of an empty apartment I had been expecting. Marcus had texted me at 3 o'clock to say he was working late on the Meridian Tower appraisal and would not be home until 8. We had no dinner plans. We had not invited anyone over. I set my briefcase down in the entryway and stood very still. The kitchen light was on. I could hear the specific sound of a ceramic dish being placed on the stove. I walked through the living room and found Eleanor Holt standing at my kitchen counter, stirring something in my largest pot, wearing an apron she had brought from her own home. My mother-in-law was 61 years old, a small, precise woman who carried herself with the specific rigidity of someone who has spent decades maintaining a position through force of will rather than force of circumstance. She had the same dark eyes as Marcus, intelligent, quick, always calculating the distance between where she was and where she intended to be. She turned when she heard me and smiled. "Serena," she said, as if it were entirely natural for her to be standing in my kitchen on a Thursday evening without an invitation. "You are home early. I thought I would have dinner ready before you arrived." I looked at the pot on the stove. I looked at the apron. I looked at the key to our apartment that she was not holding, because she did not have a key to our apartment, which meant Marcus had given her one without telling me. "Eleanor," I said, "what are you doing here?" "I came to talk to you," she said. Her voice was pleasant. Her eyes were not. "About Marcus, about the situation." The situation. That was what the Holt family had been calling my husband's medical condition for 3 months. Not his injury, not his recovery. The situation. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus Holt was 37 years old, a structural engineer who specialized in high-rise building assessment for a firm that did business across the entire eastern seaboard. He was precise and methodical and deeply genuinely kind, in the specific way of people who have decided that kindness is not a weakness, but a form of professional discipline that you build better things when you care about the people who will live and work inside them. We had been married for 4 years. We had met at a conference on building safety codes in Boston, where I had been presenting a paper on financial fraud in construction contract bidding, and he had been in the audience because the presentation was relevant to something he was working on. He came up afterward and asked a question that showed he had actually read the academic paper the presentation was based on, which was not something that happened very often in conference settings. We exchanged numbers. 3 months later, we were having dinner twice a week. A year after that, we were married in a small ceremony in Central Park with 40 people and a very good string quartet. He made me laugh. Not the polite social laugh of 2 people being agreeable to each other, the actual laugh, the one that comes from someone who has found the specific frequency of your sense of humor and knows exactly how to hit it. In 4 years of marriage, I had not once wondered whether I had made the correct choice. I tell you this because what happened to Marcus happened to us. His injury was not an abstract medical event that occurred to a person I was responsible for caring for. It happened to the center of our life together, and the force of it radiated outward into every dimension of our daily existence. 11 weeks before Eleanor appeared in my kitchen, Marcus had been conducting a structural assessment of a 23-floor commercial building in Midtown that was scheduled for renovation. The building was owned by a development company called Meridian Group. The assessment was routine, the kind of work Marcus did 30 times a year, documented and methodical and completed without incident. Except this time there was an incident. A section of interior scaffolding on the 14th floor, which had been improperly assembled by Meridian's contracted crew, collapsed. Marcus was on the platform conducting load-bearing measurements when the primary support gave way. He fell 11 feet onto a concrete subfloor. The emergency room doctors at Bellevue described what happened to his spinal cord with the specific clinical language that medical professionals use when the news is bad enough that emotional language would be insufficient to contain it. The injury was at the thoracic level. The prognosis for full motor recovery was described as uncertain. The certainty was that Marcus would not be walking out of the hospital in the near term, and that the near term might extend considerably further than any of us wanted to consider. He had been in a specialized rehabilitation unit for 6 weeks when he came home to our apartment. He communicated clearly, and fully his mind was untouched, as sharp and precise as it had always been. His body had become a problem he was working to solve with the same methodical patience he brought to every structural challenge. He had partial function in his arms enough to manage some daily activities with adaptive equipment. He could not yet use his legs. He was working on it. Every day, 2 hours of physical therapy, 1 hour of occupational therapy, and the particular grinding patience of a man who understands that the most important structures are the ones that take the longest to build correctly. I had taken 2 weeks of emergency leave when it happened, and then returned to work because we needed the income, and because Marcus specifically had asked me to go back. He did not want to be the reason I stopped doing work I was good at, and that mattered. That was the kind of man he was. What I had not anticipated was the Holt family. The Holt family arrived in our lives approximately 72 hours after Marcus's accident, with the specific energy of people who have been waiting for an occasion that justifies their involvement and have now found one. Gerald Holt. My father-in-law was 64 years old and had spent his career in commercial real estate development in New Jersey. He was a loud, broad, deeply confident man who had built his professional identity on the ability to dominate a room, and who had extended this approach to his family life with the consistency of someone who does not distinguish between the boardroom and the dinner table. Gerald Holt's opinions were not opinions. They were decisions that other people had not yet been informed of. Eleanor, his wife, operated as the family's diplomatic instrument, the person who delivered Gerald's conclusions in language designed to sound like collaborative discussion. She was in her way the more dangerous of the two, because Gerald's domineering quality was visible and therefore navigable, while Eleanor's operated below the surface, delivered in the warm register of concern and maternal care. Marcus had a brother, Connor, 34, who worked as a project manager at Gerald's development company and who had spent his entire professional life under his father's roof, financially and physically. Connor was charming in the specific way of people who have never been required to develop substance because charm had always been sufficient. His wife Diane was 31, relentlessly social, and possessed of the particular quality of women who confuse information with intelligence. She collected facts about people the way others collected objects, and she deployed them with the precision of someone who understands that knowledge managed correctly is a form of leverage. In the first week after Marcus's accident, the Holt family had been present every day at the hospital. They had brought food and flowers, and the visible displays of familial solidarity that hospital visits call for. They had spoken to doctors, reviewed discharge paperwork, and been on the surface exactly what a family is supposed to be in a crisis. I had been grateful. That was my first mistake. The gratitude had kept me from seeing what was actually happening, that the Holt family's involvement in Marcus's medical situation was not purely an expression of love. It was an expression of interest, and the nature of that interest became clearer the longer Marcus remained incapacitated. I work as a forensic accountant at a firm called Meridian Forensic Partners on the 42nd floor of a building in the financial district. Our practice focuses primarily on corporate fraud investigation, estate disputes, and financial crime analysis. I have spent 9 years building cases against people who believed that money could be moved invisibly, that the right structure of shell companies and misdirected wire transfers and falsified documentation could render a theft untraceable. They are always wrong. Money leaves tracks the way rivers leave canyons. You cannot force $100 million through a system without carving the evidence of its passage into the landscape of every institution it touches. My job is to read that landscape. I am very good at it. My mother-in-law did not know what I did for a living in any meaningful detail. She knew I was an accountant, in the way that people know a thing without understanding it, the way you know that a building has a foundation without knowing anything about the specific mechanics of load distribution. She knew I was an accountant, the way she knew I was taller than her and had worked in the financial district. It was biographical data without operational significance. That misunderstanding was going to be the most expensive mistake the Holt family ever made. Eleanor set a bowl of soup in front of me at my own kitchen table, with the serene authority of a woman who has decided that the formality of ownership is a technicality. "I want to talk to you about Marcus's care," she said. "His care is being managed," I said. "He has a physiatrist, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, and a home nursing aide who comes 3 days a week. His medical team is excellent." "His medical team is expensive," Eleanor said. "Yes," I said. "It is. Gerald and I have been looking at the financial picture," she said, folding her hands on the table. "Marcus's disability insurance is covering a portion of his lost income, but it does not cover everything. The medical costs above what insurance reimburses are substantial. I am aware of the financial picture," I said. "I am a financial professional." Eleanor smiled the smile she used when she was about to say something she had rehearsed. "We think it would make more sense for Marcus to move in with us in New Jersey for his recovery period. Gerald has already spoken with an architect about converting the guest wing into an accessible suite. Eleanor Manor has significantly more space than this apartment, and we would be able to provide full-time care without the cost of hired help." I looked at my mother-in-law. Eleanor Manor was the name the Holts had given to their 7,000-square-foot house in Montclair. They had named their house. This had always been one of the clearest signals about the Holt family's relationship with their own self-conception. "Marcus is not moving to New Jersey," I said. "Serena." Eleanor's voice carried the particular weight of a woman deploying patience as a weapon. "I understand that this is difficult, but you work full-time. You cannot provide Marcus with the level of care he needs while maintaining your professional obligations. We are his family. This is what family does." "I am his family," I said. "I am his wife." "Of course," she said smoothly, "but Gerald and I have resources that would allow Marcus to receive much better care than he can receive here. And honestly, and I say this out of genuine concern for both of you, the financial strain of maintaining this apartment while covering his medical costs is going to become unsustainable very quickly. I looked at the soup she had made in my kitchen. I looked at the key she had used to enter my apartment without invitation. I looked at my mother-in-law's composed, pleasant face and the specific quality of absolute certainty behind her eyes. "Eleanor," I said, "I appreciate your concern. Marcus and I will discuss any changes to his care arrangement together. That conversation does not involve Gerald or you." The pleasantness behind Eleanor's expression thinned slightly, the way glass thins at the edge before it breaks. "And Serena, I think you are being unnecessarily defensive about what is genuinely a practical suggestion." "I think you should leave," I said. She left. She left the soup on the stove. She did not take the key. I poured the soup down the drain. I changed the apartment locks the following morning before I went to work. Marcus came home from his hospital rehabilitation unit on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I had spent the previous weekend with an accessibility contractor, reconfiguring our apartment wide-in doorways, grab bars, a roll-in shower conversion, a hospital-grade adjustable bed positioned in our bedroom to allow him the view of the Manhattan skyline that he had always found calming. I had researched adaptive equipment for 3 weeks, ordered everything that his occupational therapist recommended, and arranged the space with the specific methodical attention that Marcus himself would have brought to a structural problem. When the medical transport van arrived and the lift lowered his wheelchair to the sidewalk, and he looked up at our building and then at me, the expression on his face was the same one he had worn at our wedding, the expression of a man who is exactly where he has chosen to be and who knows it. "You moved the furniture," he said. His voice was still, his voice steady, precise, with the particular dry quality that I had loved since Boston. "I moved some furniture," I said. "The bed is facing east," he said. "The sunrise is better from that angle," I said. He looked at me for a moment. "You measured it." "I may have used a compass," I said. He laughed, the actual laugh. 11 weeks after his accident in front of our building on a Tuesday morning, Marcus Holt laughed, and every one of those 11 weeks compressed into the sound of it. We went upstairs. I pushed his chair through the widened doorway. He looked around the apartment, the careful reconfigurations, the grab bar placement, the specific positioning of every item he might need at the level his arms could reach. "Serena," he said. "I know where everything is if you need help," I said. "But you won't need help with most of it. I checked the reach specifications with your OT." He was quiet for a moment. "You did not tell them yet," he said. Not a question. He meant his family. He knew me well enough to know I had not told the Holts how thoroughly I had prepared for his return, because if I had told them, they would have used it as an occasion to be present. "I was going to mention it," I said. "After I was home," he said. "Yes?" I said. He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. We both understood what we were not saying. The Holt family had a gravitational quality, the ability to make themselves the center of any situation that involved their son, and to reconfigure every other element of that situation around their own comfort and authority. Marcus had lived inside that gravitational field for 37 years. He knew its mechanics better than I did. My mother called you, he said. She came over, I said. 3 weeks ago. She suggested you move to Montclair for your recovery. Marcus was quiet. I changed the locks, I said. He looked at me. Something in his expression, not surprise exactly, more like the specific recognition of a person who has spent years watching a situation develop and has now seen it reach the point he always expected. Tell me what she said, he said. I told him. All of it, the soup, the key, the framing around financial strain and inadequate care. I told him with the same precision I use in court filings, without embellishment, and without the emotional weight that would have made it harder for him to hear clearly. When I finished, Marcus looked at the window for a long moment. The money thing, he said. That is the part that concerns me. Yes, I said. He understood exactly what I meant. We had talked in the weeks before his discharge about the financial landscape of his recovery. The disability insurance, the medical costs, the apartment mortgage. The picture was tight but manageable. I had run the numbers carefully, and we had enough provided. Nothing significant changed. They are going to try to use the financial pressure as leverage, Marcus said. I think they already are, I said. The question is how far they are willing to go. Marcus looked at me with the expression he used when he was solving a problem, the focused patient quality of someone who understands that the correct answer to a structural challenge is rarely the first one you consider. Let me make a call, he said. To who? I said. My accountant, he said. He paused. My old accountant. Not your kind of accountant. What kind of accountant? I said. The kind who has been managing the family business accounts for 20 years, Marcus said. The kind who might be willing to have a very quiet conversation with me about some things I noticed before my accident. I looked at my husband. What did you notice? I said. Numbers, he said, in the Meridian project files, before I fell. Some things that did not add up. The room was very quiet. Outside our window, New York went about its business with the magnificent indifference of a city that has seen everything. Tell me, I said. And he did. What Marcus told me that afternoon changed the shape of everything that followed. Not immediately, the full picture did not assemble itself in a single afternoon. It assembled over the following weeks, piece by piece, with the slow, inevitable clarity of a financial investigation finding its own structure. But the seed of it was in what Marcus had seen in the Meridian project files before he fell. Marcus had been conducting the structural assessment of the Meridian Tower renovation for 6 weeks before the accident. In the course of that work, he had reviewed the building's architectural plans, the renovation budget documentation, and the structural engineering reports from the original construction. This was standard procedure. What was not standard was what he found in the ownership records when he went to verify the chain of liability for the scaffolding systems. The contracted scaffolding company, the one whose improperly assembled platform had given way under him, was a company called Allied Vertical Solutions. It was listed in the Meridian contract documents as an independent vendor with a competitive bidding history. Marcus had pulled their licensing records as part of his assessment protocol. The records were current and appeared legitimate. What he had noticed in the 3 days before his accident was something in the payment structure between Meridian Group and Allied Vertical Solutions that did not match the contract terms. The payments were running on a schedule inconsistent with the project milestones. They were larger than the contract specified, and they were routing through a secondary account that the contract did not reference. He had flagged it as a potential billing discrepancy and intended to raise it with Meridian's project director the week after the accident. He had not yet raised it. He had been lying on a concrete subfloor in a midtown building, and the opportunity had not presented itself. I sat across from my husband in our reconfigured living room and listened to him describe what he had found. I am a forensic accountant. I have spent 9 years building cases from exactly the kind of discrepancy he was describing. My brain began processing the implications with the automatic precision of a system that has been trained to see through financial surfaces. The scaffolding that collapsed, I said. Was it Allied Vertical Solutions equipment? Yes, Marcus said. And their payment was running above contract terms, I said. Significantly above, he said. I estimated the overage at somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 over the project period. Were they the lowest bidder? I said. Third lowest, he said. Which made the selection unusual. They were not the cheapest, not the most experienced. The selection rationale in the file was thin. I looked at my hands on the table. Who selected them? I said. Marcus looked at me steadily. The project is managed by Meridian Group's development arm. Meridian Group is 51% owned by Gerald Holt's development company. Connor Holt sits on the Meridian Project Committee. The room was very quiet for a very long time. Marcus, I said carefully. I know, he said. If Allied Vertical Solutions was selected improperly, and if the payment structure was fraudulent, and if the scaffolding was improperly assembled as a result of cost cutting that the overbilling was designed to obscure, then the company responsible for my accident is connected to my father's business, Marcus said. And the people who selected the company that put me in this chair are my father and my brother. I sat with this for a long moment. The precision of it, the specific, terrible precision of it was the kind of thing that I encountered in my professional work and had spent 9 years cultivating a clinical detachment around. The clinical detachment was harder to find right now. You have not told them that you know, I said. No, he said. How long have you known? I began to piece it together in the hospital, he said. I had a great deal of time to think, and you said nothing. I was waiting for you to come home, he said. I looked at my husband, Marcus Holt, who had spent 37 years inside the Holt family gravitational field and had spent 11 weeks in a hospital bed thinking his way to the center of the thing that had put him there waiting for me to come home so we could think about it together. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. We are going to need documentation, I said. Everything you have. The payment records the contract terms, the bidding documentation, everything you can reconstruct. And then I need access to the project files. Is there a way to get them? I still have my firm's login credentials, he said. They have not been deactivated. My firm has access to the full Meridian project documentation. That is where we start, I said. He looked at me with the expression I had come to know as his problem-solving face, the specific patient focus of a man who has identified the load-bearing element of a structural challenge and is now calculating the correct approach. You are going to build a case, he said. I am going to build a case, I said. Against my family, he said. Against the people who put you in that wheelchair, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Those are the same people. Yes, I said. They are. He nodded once. The kind of nod that is not agreement, but acknowledgement. The recognition that a difficult thing is true, and that the truth of it is more important than the difficulty. Where do we start? He said. You said your old accountant might be willing to talk, I said. Start there, quietly, while I pull the financial documentation. And my parents, he said. They will want to be involved in my recovery. They will be here regularly. Let them be here, I said. Let them bring soup and concern and whatever else they bring. Don't tell them anything. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. You are going to let them think they are winning, he said. I am going to let them show me everything they intend to do, I said. People who believe they are in control of a situation always reveal more than they intend to. You do this at work, he said. Every day, I said. It works every time. He almost smiled. Not quite the situation was too serious for almost, but the expression was close enough that I could see it. Serena, he said. Yes, I said. Thank you for changing the locks. You're welcome, I said. The Holt family arrived the following Saturday with the force and organization of a military operation. Gerald came first in the black SUV he drove everywhere as a statement of scale. He parked it in a 15-minute zone directly in front of our building, which told me everything about his relationship with rules that I had not already observed. Eleanor came with him, carrying a bag of food and wearing the expression of a woman arriving to assess a situation she intends to manage. Connor and Diane arrived 20 minutes later because Connor was always 20 minutes late to everything, which Gerald had always attributed to his son being in demand, and which was actually attributable to Connor being constitutionally incapable of prioritizing anything that was not immediately interesting to him. They came upstairs. I opened the door. I offered coffee and the specific, pleasant neutrality that I have spent 9 years cultivating in professional settings, where the people across the table are not what they appear to be. Gerald walked into the living room and looked at the apartment reconfiguration with the expression of a man assessing property he is considering acquiring. He looked at the grab bars, the widened doorways, the adjustable furniture. He looked at Marcus in his wheelchair by the window. Son, Gerald said. The word landed with the specific weight Gerald gave everything heavy proprietary, the weight of a man who considers his son's existence a reflection of his own. Dad, Marcus said. Gerald walked over and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. I watched Marcus's expression not change. He had spent 37 years managing his father's physical gestures of ownership, and he was very practiced at it. This place is too small, Gerald said, looking around. You need more room to maneuver. Eleanor and I looked at the guest wing last week. The architect says conversion would take 6 weeks maximum. I'm comfortable here, Marcus said. Marcus. Gerald's voice dropped into the register he used when he was instructing rather than suggesting. This is not about comfort. This is about practical reality. You need space. You need support. You need your family around you. Serena is my family, Marcus said. The sentence landed in the room with a specific weight. Gerald looked at me. Eleanor looked at me. Diane looked at me with the particular interest of a woman who collects information. Of course, Gerald said. Of course she is. But Serena works full-time. She cannot be here all day. I have care support 3 days a week, Marcus said. Serena and I have reviewed the arrangement carefully. We are managing well. Financially, Gerald said. Financially, Marcus confirmed. Gerald looked at me again, the look of a man taking the measure of an opponent he has not yet decided to acknowledge as an opponent. Well, Gerald said, we are here to support in whatever way we can. I smiled. The specific professional, entirely opaque smile that I use in depositions. We appreciate that, I said. Connor had settled onto the sofa and was looking at his phone. Diane was examining the apartment with the detailed attention of someone conducting an inventory. She picked up a framed photograph from the bookshelf Marcus and me at our wedding and looked at it for a moment before setting it back down. You have done a lot of work on the place, Diane said to me, gesturing at the grab bars. Yes, I said. It must have been expensive, she said. Everything worth doing is, I said. Diane smiled the smile of a woman who has filed a data point. She moved on to examine the bookshelf. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table and began unpacking the food she had brought. Gerald sat across from Marcus and began talking about the Meridian project, the legal situation, the liability insurance, the workers' compensation claim that Marcus's firm had filed on his behalf. He spoke about it with the authority of a man briefing a subordinate, not the care of a father visiting his injured son. I stood in the kitchen doorway and listened, and made coffee and watched. What I was watching for was exactly what Gerald said about Meridian. Because Gerald's involvement in Meridian Group, which he would frame as entirely separate from the development company that bore his name, was the central fact of the investigation that Marcus and I had begun building. The insurance is going to drag this out, Gerald said, leaning back in his chair. These liability claims always take time. The important thing is not to rush it. Let the process work. Of course, Marcus said. Have you spoken to a personal injury attorney? Gerald said. Serena has been in contact with one, Marcus said. Gerald looked at me. Oh, a preliminary consultation, I said, to understand Marcus's options. Good, Gerald said with the tone of a man who does not find this good at all. Just make sure you don't move too fast. These things are complicated. The relationships between the parties can be delicate. Delicate, I said. Meridian is a significant operation, Gerald said. The people involved have a lot at stake. You want to be careful about how you approach the legal side. I looked at my father-in-law across my kitchen island. Gerald Holt, 64 years old, sitting in his son's apartment 4 days after his son came home from 11 weeks in hospital rehabilitation, telling me to be careful about how we approach the legal situation surrounding his son's accident. Not how to get justice, not how to hold the responsible parties accountable, how to be careful. I appreciate the advice, I said. He nodded satisfied. He went back to talking to Marcus about something else. I turned back to the coffee maker and allowed myself exactly 3 seconds of the specific cold anger that forensic accountants are not supposed to feel during active investigations. Then I put it away where it belonged in the background, where it would fuel the work without disrupting the clarity. The work began in earnest the following Monday. I have a contact at my firm, a senior partner named David Chen, who has been practicing forensic accounting for 26 years and who has the specific, unhurried patience of someone who has dismantled more corporate fraud structures than he can easily count. I went to his office at 7:30 in the morning and closed the door and told him what I had. David listened without interrupting. This is one of the qualities that makes him exceptional, the ability to receive complex information without imposing his own framework on it before it has fully presented itself. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You have a conflict," he said. "I know that," I said. "My husband is the injured party, and the potential defendants are his family members. I cannot be the lead on this." "But you are the one who has the information," he said. "I am the one who has the starting point," I said. "The information needs to be developed by someone without a personal stake." "Who is your personal injury attorney?" he said. "Rebecca Torres," I said. "She focuses on workplace injury and construction negligence." David nodded. He knew Rebecca. Everyone in the financial district, legal and financial community knew each other the way tributaries know the rivers they flow into. "You need two parallel tracks," David said. "The civil litigation track through Rebecca and the financial investigation track through us, completely separate, no official connection until you have the documentation to make the connection official." "Yes," I said. "And the conflict issue, I will not be the lead investigator," I said. "I will be the source. You will run the investigation." David looked at me for a long moment. In 26 years of forensic accounting, he had an exceptionally accurate read on people. He was reading me now, assessing whether my personal stake in the situation was going to compromise my professional judgment. "Serena," he said, "you know that if we find what you think we are going to find, this is going to be a criminal matter, not just a civil one." "I know," I said. "Your husband's family," he said. "The people who put my husband in a wheelchair," I said. David looked at me for another moment. Then he picked up his pen and opened his notebook. "Tell me everything Marcus observed in the project files," he said. I told him. All of it. The payment schedule discrepancies, the bidding anomalies, the unusual selection of allied vertical solutions, the secondary account routing. I told him with the precision that 9 years of practice had built into my professional vocabulary, each fact in its correct relationship to the others, the structure of the evidence as clearly presented as I could make it. David filled 3 pages of his notebook. He asked clarifying questions. He drew a preliminary chart of the entities and their relationships: Meridian Group, Gerald's development company; Allied Vertical Solutions, the Meridian Project Committee. When he finished, he looked at the chart for a moment. "The scaffolding failure," he said. "Was it investigated?" "OSHA conducted an inspection," I said. "Their report cited inadequate assembly protocol and insufficient safety checks. Allied Vertical Solutions received a citation and a fine." "Was there a finding of intentional cost-cutting?" he said. "The OSHA report was framed as negligence rather than deliberate violation," I said. "But the citation noted that the assembly deviated from both manufacturer specifications and industry standards in ways that were, in the inspector's language, not consistent with a competent contractor's standard practices." Meaning they cut corners, David said. Significantly, I said. And if we can show that the overbilling was being used to fund cost-cutting, that was generating profit for Allied and the people directing Allied, then the negligence becomes knowing, I said. The cost-cutting was not carelessness. It was deliberate. The scaffolding was assembled improperly because building it correctly would have cost money that was already being taken out of the project through the fraudulent billing. David looked at the chart. The people directing Allied, he said. Do you have a connection between Allied and Gerald's company? Not yet, I said. That is what we need to find. That is the thread, he said. Yes, I said. If we pull it, he said, and it leads where you think it leads. Then Marcus's injury was not an accident caused by a negligent contractor, I said. It was an injury caused by a fraudulent scheme in which his father and brother were participants. The office was very quiet. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York spread out in the morning light, indifferent and beautiful and impossibly large. All right, David said. He recapped his pen. We start today. In the weeks that followed, I learned something about my mother-in-law that I had not previously appreciated. In 4 years of observing her, Eleanor Holt was considerably more financially sophisticated than she presented herself to be. The Holt family's strategy, which became clear to me over the course of several family visits, and one specifically illuminating dinner at Eleanor Manor in Montclair, was not simply to pressure Marcus to move to New Jersey. That was the opening position designed to be conceded as a gesture of reasonableness. The actual position was more specific, and it was being constructed with a patience and deliberateness that I recognized from my professional work as the hallmark of someone who had done this before. The strategy had 3 elements. The first was financial dependency. The Holt family was systematically identifying every financial pressure point in Marcus's recovery and positioning themselves as the solution. Gerald had made 3 separate references to the cost of Marcus's care since he came home. Eleanor had twice offered to contribute to the household expenses in ways that would have created an obligation rather than simply a gift. Money offered with conditions embedded in the framing rather than the text. Connor had mentioned in what he presented as a passing comment that Gerald's development company had contacts in medical equipment supply who could get Marcus's adaptive equipment at a discount, which would have created a financial relationship between Marcus's care and Gerald's professional network. The second element was information control. Diane, whose facility for collecting data I had observed from the first day, had been systematically building a picture of our finances. The questions she asked were always framed as concern about Marcus's comfort, about whether we had everything we needed, about how I was managing. The content of the questions was always about money. The third element was the legal isolation. Gerald's advice to be careful about the personal injury litigation, to let the process work, to be aware of the delicacy of the relationships involved. This was not generic caution. It was specific pressure designed to slow or prevent a legal process that, if it ran its full course, would expose the people behind the fraudulent billing scheme. I observed all 3 elements with the professional clarity of someone who has spent 9 years watching financial manipulation from the inside. I said nothing. I gave them nothing to read in my responses. I was pleasant and appropriately grateful and entirely opaque. Meanwhile, David and his team were pulling threads. The Allied Vertical Solutions thread led within 10 days to something David described when he called me as a corporate structure that was clearly designed by someone who understood exactly how to obscure ownership. Allied Vertical Solutions was registered in Delaware with a registered agent that served hundreds of entities. Its managing member was listed as a holding company. The holding company's managing member was another holding company. The trail of entities was designed to terminate in opacity. It did not terminate in opacity. It terminated in a beneficial ownership record that Allied's legal structure had been designed to hide, but that existed as all such records exist in a form that was accessible to people who knew where to look and had the legal authority to look there. The beneficial owner of Allied Vertical Solutions, through 3 layers of Delaware shell corporations, was a company called G.H. Capital Partners. G.H. Capital Partners was a privately held investment vehicle registered in New York. Its principals were listed in its operating agreement as Gerald Holt and Connor Holt. I received this information from David at 3:15 on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting at my desk on the 42nd floor of the Financial District building where I had worked for 9 years. I read the document he sent me twice. I looked at the names. I set down my phone. I sat with it for 60 seconds. The clinical detachment that I had spent 9 years cultivating held the way a well-built structure holds under load, not comfortably, not without strain, but without yielding. Then I picked up the phone and called Marcus. David found the ownership connection. I said when he answered. There was a pause. Tell me, he said. I told him. The shell companies, the holding entities, the beneficial ownership record, G.H. Capital Partners, Gerald Holt, Connor Holt. The silence on Marcus's end lasted longer than I had expected. The scaffolding company that assembled the platform that collapsed under me, Marcus said, is owned by my father and my brother. Yes, I said. Another pause. And the overbilling was coming back to them, I said, through the shell structure. They were billing Meridian above contract terms for scaffolding work and pocketing the difference through Allied. The cost-cutting was how they maintained the margin they were collecting, inflated payments, and delivering substandard work. And my accident, Marcus said, the scaffolding that failed, I said, was on a project managed by a company your father partially owns, assembled by a company your father fully owns, installed at a cost that was being fraudulently inflated to generate personal profit for your father and your brother. The silence this time was very long. Marcus, I said. I know, he said. His voice was steady. The steadiness cost him something I could hear what it cost him. I am going to send this to Rebecca, I said. And David is preparing a referral to the U.S. Attorney's Office. This has crossed from civil into criminal territory. Yes, Marcus said. Are you all right? I said. A pause. I will be, he said. I know, I said. Serena, he said. Yes, I said. When you are ready to move to the next phase, he said, I want to be there. You will be, I said. Every step. He was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said. We are just getting started. The next phase required patience of a specific kind, the patience of a person who has laid a trap and must now wait for the subjects to walk into it without being able to show any sign that the trap exists. The Holt family continued their visits. Gerald continued his advice about the litigation. Eleanor continued her offers of financial assistance. Diane continued her questions. Connor continued being 20 minutes late and looking at his phone. I continued being pleasant and appropriate and opaque. Behind that surface, David's team completed their financial documentation. Rebecca Torres filed a preliminary complaint in New York State Supreme Court, naming Meridian Group and Allied Vertical Solutions as defendants in a negligence and fraudulent billing case. The complaint was carefully drafted to establish the facts of the scaffolding failure and the billing irregularities without yet naming the ultimate beneficial owners, Gerald and Connor Holt, because the discovery process, once the litigation was filed, would surface that connection through the defendant's own documentation. The U.S. Attorney's Office, through David's referral, opened a preliminary inquiry into the shell company structure. This was not yet a criminal investigation. It was the stage before the investigation, the stage where the authorities assess whether the facts warrant the resources of a full inquiry. The facts in David's assessment clearly warranted it. And then Eleanor called me. It was a Sunday morning in November. Marcus was in his physical therapy session in the apartment. He had reached the point where the therapist could work with him in the living room rather than needing the rehabilitation center's equipment. I had stepped into the study to review documents when my phone rang. "Serena," Eleanor said. Her voice was different from its usual managed warmth, tighter, more precise. "I need to speak with you. Not at the apartment. Can you meet me?" I looked at the document on my desk, the GH Capital Partners operating agreement, with Gerald's and Connor's names in the principal section. "Of course," I said, where she named a restaurant in Midtown. "Neutral ground," I noted. "Not Eleanor Manor. Not our apartment." "Tomorrow at noon," she said. "I will be there," I said. When I came back to the living room, Marcus's therapy session had paused for a water break. He looked at me when I came in. He read my expression. He was very good at reading my expressions, and his own expression shifted into the focused, patient quality of a man who has identified a new load-bearing element. "My mother," he said. "Tomorrow at noon," I said. "A restaurant in Midtown." He looked out the window. The Manhattan skyline was doing what it does on clear November mornings, the buildings catching light at angles that make the whole city look like it is made of something more permanent than glass and steel. "She knows something is coming," he said. "Or she suspects it," I said. "What are you going to do?" he said. I picked up the document from the desk. I set it on the table beside his wheelchair where he could read it. "I am going to find out what she knows," I said, "and I am going to let her tell me exactly how much they are willing to do to stop it." Marcus read the document. He read the names in the principal section. He looked at them for a long time. "My father and my brother," he said. "Yes," I said. "They put me in this chair," he said. The sentence was not grief. It was not anger. It was the specific, terrible clarity of a fact that has been fully acknowledged. "Yes," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked up at me. "Tomorrow at noon," he said. "Wear the gray suit." "Why?" I said. "Because it is the one you wear when you are about to win something," he said. I looked at my husband. Marcus Holt, who knew me well enough to know which suit I wore to trials I intended to win, who had spent 11 weeks in a hospital bed thinking his way to the center of the thing that had broken him, who had come home to an apartment I had prepared with a compass and a set of reach specifications, and who was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, looking at me with the expression of a man who is exactly where he has chosen to be. "The gray suit," I said. "The gray suit," he said. Eleanor was already seated when I arrived. This told me something. Eleanor Holt was a woman who arrived at social occasions precisely on time, not early, not late, but at the exact moment that communicated both respect for the appointment and confidence in her own standing. Arriving early to a restaurant and waiting meant she was either anxious or she wanted the positional advantage of being settled and composed when I walked through the door. I assessed this in the 3 seconds it took me to spot her across the room and walk toward the table. She had chosen a corner table with clear sight lines to both entrances. She was wearing a dark green cashmere sweater and had a glass of still water in front of her. Her posture was perfect. Her hands were folded on the tablecloth with the deliberate stillness of someone who has been practicing stillness since I texted to confirm the lunch. I sat down across from her. I ordered water from the passing server. I looked at my mother-in-law. "Thank you for coming," Eleanor said. "Of course," I said. There was a pause, the specific pause of two people deciding who is going to speak first about the actual subject. Eleanor had called this meeting, which meant she had an agenda. But she was also, in my experience, a woman who preferred to receive information before revealing her own position. She would want me to speak first. I did not speak first. The server came back with water and menus. We both looked at the menus for a moment. Eleanor ordered a salad. I ordered soup. We gave the menus back. "How is Marcus?" Eleanor said. "He is making excellent progress," I said. "His physical therapist is very pleased with his strength development." "That is wonderful," she said. She paused. "And you? How are you managing?" "Very well," I said. "Thank you." Another pause. Eleanor looked at her water glass. "Serena," she said, "I want to speak to you directly." "Please," I said. "Gerald received a call last week," she said, "from a colleague at Meridian Group. There has been a legal filing, a complaint naming Meridian Group and Allied Vertical Solutions in a negligence case related to Marcus's accident." "Yes," I said. "Rebecca Torres filed it. She is Marcus's attorney." Eleanor looked at me steadily. "Gerald was not informed that Marcus had retained an attorney." "Marcus did not need Gerald's authorization to retain legal counsel," I said. A very small tightening around Eleanor's eyes. "Of course not. But the filing has created some complexity for Gerald's business relationships. I imagine a lawsuit naming a company he is involved with would create complexity," I said. The tightening became more pronounced. "Serena, you understand that Gerald's connection to Meridian Group is as an investor. He is not a principal in the day-to-day operations." "I understand how he has characterized his connection," I said. A pause. Eleanor looked at me with the expression of a woman recalibrating. She had come to this meeting expecting to manage me to deploy the combination of maternal warmth and financial pressure that had been the family's operating approach for the past 3 months. She was encountering a different situation than she had prepared for. There is a financial component to our concern, Eleanor said, pivoting to the second element. The litigation process is going to be expensive and protracted. Personal injury cases against large construction entities often drag on for years. Marcus's disability insurance will not cover legal costs. The financial strain. Eleanor, I said. She stopped. I know what you are going to say, I said. You are going to tell me that the litigation is going to be financially difficult and that the family can help. You are going to suggest that Gerald has contacts who can facilitate a quiet settlement. You are going to tell me that the relationships involved are delicate and that the correct approach is to manage this privately rather than through the courts. Eleanor was very still. What I need you to understand, I said, keeping my voice at the same professional register I use in boardrooms where the people across the table have done something they would prefer not to be examined, is that Marcus and I have already considered all of those factors. We have made our decisions. The litigation will proceed. Serena. Eleanor's voice had dropped its warmth entirely. What remained was considerably more direct. I am going to be honest with you. The filing as currently written has implications that go beyond the civil case. If the discovery process surfaces certain financial information about the entities named as defendants, the consequences for this family will be severe. Yes, I said. They will. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a person understanding for the first time that they are not managing the situation they believed they were managing. Eleanor looked at me across the restaurant table. For a moment, just a moment, the composed, precise surface of her dropped entirely, and I saw what was underneath. Not malice, not the cold calculation I had been expecting. What I saw was fear. The genuine, unperformed fear of a woman who has been inside a structure for 40 years and has just understood that the structure is compromised. How much do you know? She said. It was the most honest thing Eleanor Holt had ever said to me. Everything, I said. I want to tell you what happened in the 48 hours after that lunch, because those 48 hours contain the decisions that determine the shape of everything that followed. The first thing I did when I left the restaurant was call David Chen. She knows the litigation has implications for the beneficial ownership structure, I said. She came to me rather than going through attorneys. That means either she doesn't know how much we have, or she knows and is trying to assess our position before they respond formally. Which do you think it is? David said. Both, I said. She knows we know something. She doesn't know how much. The U.S. Attorney's Office called this morning, David said. They have moved from preliminary inquiry to formal investigation. The shell company structure combined with the OSHA citation creates what they described as a compelling nexus of civil and criminal liability. Timeline, I said. They are moving carefully, David said. These cases require documentation that is airtight, but they are moving. Good, I said. I need one more thing from you, the financial records for Eleanor Manor, the Holt's primary residence. I want to know what is mortgaged, what the debt structure looks like, and whether any of the funding traces to GH Capital Partners or Allied Vertical Solutions. You think she is financially exposed too? David said. Eleanor signed the GH Capital Partners operating agreement, I said. It is a New York State entity. Every principal has signature authority. If she signed, she is a beneficial owner. A pause. You have the operating agreement. Rebecca obtained it through the preliminary discovery request, I said. Eleanor Holt is listed as a limited partner. She receives distributions. Another pause. She came to that lunch knowing she is personally exposed, David said. Yes, I said, which is why she came to me instead of having Gerald send an attorney. She is trying to figure out if there is a way to limit her own exposure without implicating herself further. What are you going to do? David said. I am going to let her wait, I said, and then I am going to give her the information she needs to make the right decision. The right decision for you, David said. The right decision for Marcus, I said. The second thing I did was go home and tell Marcus everything. Not the professional summary, the full account, including Eleanor's expression when she understood I already knew everything, including the fear underneath the composure, including the moment when she asked how much I knew and I said everything. Marcus listened without interrupting. He was by the window the way he often was in the evenings, the Manhattan skyline, doing the November thing, where the cold air makes the lights sharper and the distances between buildings seem longer. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. She is afraid, he said finally. Yes, I said. Of the criminal exposure, he said. Primarily, I said. But also of what it means for the family if this becomes public. The Holts have built their entire social identity on Gerald's business success. If GH Capital Partners and Allied Vertical Solutions become the subject of a federal fraud investigation, everything they have built their reputation on collapses. Marcus looked at the skyline. She did not tell Gerald she was meeting you. I looked at him. How do you know that? Because if Gerald knew she was meeting you, he would have insisted on being there, Marcus said. Or he would have sent Connor. Eleanor came alone because she is operating independently of Gerald on this. I had not considered this explicitly, but as soon as Marcus said it, I recognized it as correct. She is protecting herself, I said. She is protecting herself, Marcus confirmed, which means she is not a unified front with Gerald and Connor. She is a separate actor with separate interests. This was significant. In financial investigations, the moment a conspiracy fractures along individual self-interest lines is the moment that evidence becomes dramatically easier to access. People protecting themselves individually make decisions that expose the people they are separating from. What do you want to do? I said. Marcus turned his chair slightly to look at me directly. I want to call her, he said. Tonight, he said. I want to tell her that I know what they did, not through an attorney, not through a court filing. I want my mother to hear it from me. I looked at my husband, Marcus Holt, who had spent 11 weeks in hospital rehabilitation and 3 months at home, understanding with complete clarity that the people who had shaped his entire life had also through greed and negligence broken it, who had processed all of that with the methodical patience of a structural engineer and was now ready to use it. Are you sure? I said. I have been sure since the hospital, he said. I needed the documentation to be complete first. It is complete. The documentation strengthens our position if she cooperates, I said. If she shuts down and goes to Gerald, we lose the individual fracture and they unify. I know, he said. That is a risk I am willing to take. I looked at him for a moment. Then I handed him his phone. I did not listen to the call. Marcus made it from the study with the door closed, which was his way of telling me he needed the privacy of a conversation between a son and his mother that had nothing to do with legal strategy. He was in the study for 47 minutes. When he came out, his face had the specific quality of someone who has put down a weight they have been carrying for a very long time and is not yet sure what the absence of it feels like. I did not ask immediately. I brought him tea and sat across from him and let the silence be what it needed to be. After a while he said, "She knew about the billing fraud. She did not know about the scaffolding failure directly. She claims she did not know that Allied's cost-cutting was what caused the accident, but she knew the money was being taken improperly." "Did she know about the beneficial ownership structure?" I said. "She signed the operating agreement," he said. "She knew what she was signing." "Did she admit that on the call?" "Not explicitly," he said. "But she did not deny it when I described the structure. She said, and this is the part that matters, she said that when she understood what had happened to me, she did not believe Gerald had intended for anyone to get hurt." I absorbed this carefully. She is drawing a distinction between the fraud and the accident. I said, "Yes," Marcus said. "She is saying the fraud was deliberate, but the accident was a consequence they did not intend." "That is not a legal distinction that helps them," I said. "No," Marcus said. "But it is the distinction she needs to make to live with herself." I looked at my husband. "What did you say to her?" "I told her that I understood the distinction she was drawing," he said, "and that the law does not draw it the same way she does, and that the only path forward that limits the damage to everyone, including her, is full cooperation with the investigation." "She agreed. She did not disagree," he said. "She asked for time." "How much time?" I said. "She said she needed to speak with someone," he said. "Not Gerald, an attorney of her own." This was the right answer. Eleanor Holt, operating independently and with her own legal counsel, was considerably more useful to the investigation than Eleanor Holt unified with Gerald's defense team. "Did she give you a timeline?" I said. "She said she would call me within 48 hours, he said. I looked at the clock on the wall. 47 minutes on the call, and Eleanor Holt had committed to a 48-hour decision window. This was faster than I had expected." "She is scared," I said. "She is terrified," Marcus said. She kept saying that she did not think it would go this far, that Gerald had assured her it was just a business arrangement, that she had trusted him. I thought about Eleanor standing in my kitchen, uninvited, stirring soup in a pot she had brought from her own house. I thought about her in the Midtown restaurant, hands folded, composure, flawless, deploying warmth and pressure in alternating register. I thought about the woman who had spent 40 years inside Gerald Holt's gravitational field, performing the role of the diplomat who delivered his conclusions and who was now understanding that the conclusions she had been delivering had consequences she had not been shown. "Do you believe her?" I said. "That she did not know about the accident causation?" Marcus considered this carefully. "I believe she told herself she did not know," he said. "Whether that is the same as actually not knowing, that is a question I am not qualified to answer." "It may matter for her criminal exposure," I said. "Rebecca will assess that," Marcus said. "Not us." He was right. We had done what we could do from inside the situation. The rest was legal work that belonged to the professionals we had engaged. "Marcus," I said. "Yes," I said. How are you doing? Not the investigation. You. He looked at the window. The night skyline was very clear. I spent 11 weeks in that hospital, he said, working out what had happened. Not the medical facts, those were laid out for me pretty clearly. The other facts. The facts about my father and my brother and the kind of people they turned out to be when there was money involved. And I spent those weeks thinking about what it meant that the accident that happened to me was not random, that it was the consequence of something they chose. I waited. The anger was very clean at first, he said. It had a simple shape, and then it got more complicated the way grief always gets more complicated when you actually sit with it, because they are still my father and my brother, and Eleanor is still my mother, and none of that changes what happened. Both of those things are true at the same time. Yes, I said. I am not going to pretend it does not hurt, he said. But I am also not going to let it be the thing that defines what comes next. I looked at my husband. What defines what comes next? I said. That, he said, and made a small gesture that encompassed, I understood immediately, the apartment, the adaptive equipment, the accessible shower, the compass-measured east-facing window, the life we were still building. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. Eleanor called back in 36 hours, not 48. She had retained a criminal defense attorney named Patricia Wolfe, who practiced in Manhattan and whose reputation, which I looked up immediately, was built on exactly the kind of sophisticated white-collar defense that the GH Capital Partners situation required. The fact that Eleanor had found Patricia Wolfe in 36 hours told me she had known about Patricia Wolfe before the call had perhaps been keeping the name in reserve for a situation she had understood on some level might eventually materialize. Patricia Wolfe called Rebecca Torres. Rebecca called me. Eleanor Holt's attorney has contacted me, Rebecca said. She is indicating that her client is willing to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for consideration on the criminal exposure side. What does cooperation mean in her formulation? I said. Full disclosure of the GH Capital Partners financial structure, the Allied Vertical Solutions ownership and operating history, and the billing arrangement with Meridian Group, Rebecca said, including the decision-making process behind the Allied contract selection. She is going to give them Gerald and Connor, I said. That is what cooperation means in this context, Rebecca said. I thought about Eleanor in the restaurant asking me how much I knew. I thought about what it costs a woman to turn over 40 years of life to the legal system. What does she want in exchange? I said. She is asking for a deferred prosecution agreement on the beneficial ownership charge, Rebecca said. No prison time mandatory cooperation financial penalty commensurate with her distributions from GH Capital Partners. Is the U.S. Attorney's Office open to that? I said. I spoke with them this morning, Rebecca said. They are considering it. Her cooperation would significantly accelerate the timeline on the investigation and provide inside documentation that would otherwise take months to extract through subpoena. And Marcus, I said, what does this mean for the civil case? Eleanor's cooperation includes a stipulation that she will not contest the damages claim in the civil suit, Rebecca said. For her share of liability as a beneficial owner of Allied Vertical Solutions, she is agreeing not to fight. That does not bind Gerald or Connor, but it eliminates one defendant, and it establishes a factual record that makes the case against the other two considerably stronger. Recommend acceptance, I said. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. That is Marcus's decision, she said. I know, I said. Tell me if the terms are reasonable as a matter of legal strategy, and I will discuss it with Marcus. As a matter of legal strategy, Rebecca said, Eleanor Holt's cooperation is the single most valuable development in this case. Without an insider extracting the full beneficial ownership documentation through discovery would be contested at every step by Gerald's attorneys. With her cooperation, we have everything we need to establish the full scope of the fraud and its connection to the scaffolding failure. All right, I said. I will talk to Marcus. Marcus said yes without hesitation. I had expected him to think about it, to sit with the complexity of it, to work through the implications of his mother's cooperation and what it would mean for the people she was cooperating against. But he said yes immediately, in the quiet, certain way he had said things since coming home from the hospital. She is making the right choice, he said. Whatever her reasons. It is going to be very hard for her, I said. Yes, he said. It should be. What followed over the next 8 weeks was the most technically demanding period of my professional life, and I have spent 9 years on complex financial fraud investigations. David Chen's team, working in coordination with Rebecca Torres's civil litigation preparation and the U.S. Attorney's Office's criminal investigation, assembled the complete financial picture of GH Capital Partners, Allied Vertical Solutions, and their relationship to Meridian Group. Eleanor's cooperation opened files that would otherwise have taken months to reach through legal process. Her personal records combined with the shell company documentation and the Allied billing records created a complete map of the fraud from its inception. The fraud had begun 4 years ago, which was 2 years before Marcus's accident. Gerald Holt had established the GH Capital Partners structure initially as a straightforward investment vehicle, a way to hold and manage assets outside his primary development company. The decision to use it as the beneficial owner of Allied Vertical Solutions came approximately 18 months later when a Meridian Group project presented an opportunity that Gerald had recognized with the specific facility of someone who understands how money moves and where oversight is thin. The mechanism was simple in structure, sophisticated in execution. Allied Vertical Solutions was awarded contracts on Meridian Group projects. Contracts that Gerald influenced through his role as a Meridian investor at rates above what competitive bidding would have produced. Allied then executed the contracted work at the minimum cost, consistent with passing inspection, pocketing the difference between the inflated contract price and the actual execution cost. The excess flowed back through GH Capital Partners to Gerald and Connor as distributions. Over 4 years, the scheme had generated approximately $2.3 million in fraudulent profits. The Meridian Tower scaffolding project, the one that had put Marcus in a wheelchair, represented the most aggressive cost-cutting in the scheme's history. The scaffolding budget had been set at a level that, in David's assessment, made proper assembly technically impossible while maintaining the profit margin GH Capital Partners required. The resulting installation was not careless. It was mathematically inevitable. This distinction between negligent accident and foreseeable consequence of deliberate cost-cutting was the central argument in Rebecca's civil complaint and the central element of the U.S. Attorney's criminal referral to a federal grand jury. I reviewed the complete documentation on a Saturday morning in our apartment while Marcus worked with his physical therapist in the living room. I sat at the desk in the study and read through David's final summary report, all 217 pages of it, with the specific focused attention that I bring to every document that is going to be presented in a legal proceeding, looking for gaps, ambiguities, anything that a skilled defense attorney could use to introduce doubt. There were no gaps. David Chen does not leave gaps. When I finished reading, I set the report down and looked at the wall for a moment. $2.3 million, 4 years, and Marcus working in a building whose scaffolding had been assembled below minimum safety standards, not because the contractor was negligent, but because the margin requirement of a fraud scheme his father was running made proper assembly economically impossible. I allowed myself 60 seconds of that. Then I picked up the phone and called Rebecca. "The report is clean," I said. "When do we move?" The answer to when we move was determined by the U.S. Attorney's Office, not by us. Federal investigations operate on their own timeline, shaped by the requirements of grand jury proceedings and the need for airtight documentation before charges are filed. What I can tell you is that the timeline was considerably shorter than the average for a fraud case of this complexity, primarily because Eleanor's cooperation had delivered documentation that would otherwise have taken a year of contested discovery to obtain. While the federal machinery assembled itself, Diane created the first complication. I had been watching Diane for 3 months. The careful information collection, the questions framed as concerned the inventory-taking quality of her attention. She was Connor's early warning system, and she was good at it. When she sensed that the situation had shifted, that Serena was no longer the overwhelmed wife managing her husband's recovery, but something else, she began operating differently. She called me on a Wednesday evening in December. "I wanted to check in," she said. Her voice was its usual warm surface. "We have not seen you and Marcus in a few weeks." "Marcus has been focused on his therapy," I said. "He is making excellent progress." "Wonderful," she said. A pause. "I heard from Eleanor that there has been some legal activity related to the accident." "Marcus retained an attorney," I said. "That is not unusual in cases of workplace injury." "Of course," Diane said. Connor is concerned about the relationships involved, about how this is going to affect things for everyone." "Diane," I said, "what specifically is Connor concerned about?" A pause. She had not expected the directness. "He is concerned," she said carefully, "that the legal process might surface things that are complicated for the family." "What kind of things?" I said. "Business arrangements," she said. "Investments. Things that are perfectly legal but could be mischaracterized if they are taken out of context." I sat with this for a moment. Diane knew. Or Connor had told her enough that she had filled in the rest. She was conducting a probe trying to assess how much I had and whether there was still a possibility of containing it. "Diane," I said, "I want to give you some professional advice, not legal advice. I am not a lawyer. Professional advice from someone who investigates financial matters for a living." She was very still on her end of the line. "If Connor has concerns about business arrangements that could be mischaracterized," I said, "the appropriate response is to retain independent legal counsel immediately and to disclose fully to that counsel everything he knows about the arrangements in question. The appropriate response is not to call me and try to understand what I know." A long pause. "I see," Diane said. I hope you do, I said. She ended the call. I immediately sent a text to Rebecca. Diane Holt just called me. She was probing for information. Connor may be preparing a separate legal strategy. Rebecca replied within 10 minutes, anticipated. We'll accelerate our filing timeline on the punitive damages component. 48 hours after Diane's call, Connor Holt retained a criminal defense attorney. The retention was public record. Attorneys file notices of representation, which are accessible to anyone monitoring a case, and Rebecca notified me the moment it appeared. Connor retaining criminal defense counsel was the most significant development since Eleanor's cooperation agreement, because it confirmed that Connor understood the federal investigation was real and that he was personally exposed. It also meant the unified front that Gerald had been maintaining, the posture that this was a minor legal matter that the family would manage together, was fracturing. 3 parties, 3 sets of attorneys, 3 separate self-interests beginning to diverge. This is what always happens when a financial conspiracy is exposed. The structure that held it together was the shared interest in concealment. When concealment becomes impossible, the shared interest dissolves, and what remains is individual survival. The conspiracy eats itself. Gerald called Marcus on a Thursday morning in January. Marcus told me about it afterward. He had been alone in the apartment when the call came, his therapist having left an hour earlier, and he had answered because it was his father's number, and because Marcus Holt, despite everything, was not a man who avoided difficult conversations. Gerald talked for 11 minutes. Marcus let him talk. Gerald's position, as Marcus reconstructed it for me, was threefold. First, the legal situation was being handled by his attorneys and would be resolved in a way that was satisfactory to everyone involved. Second, the media attention. The case had begun to generate a brief item, had appeared in a construction industry publication about the OSHA citation, and subsequent civil litigation was damaging to the family's reputation and should be controlled. Third, Marcus should consider whether the litigation was worth the personal and family cost, given that a settlement could be reached that would compensate him adequately without the exposure of a full trial. Marcus listened to all 3 points. Then he said, Dad, I know about GH Capital Partners. I know about Allied Vertical Solutions. I know that you and Connor are the beneficial owners of the company whose scaffolding put me in this wheelchair. I know about the billing fraud. I know about the distributions. Gerald was silent for 12 seconds. Marcus counted. Then Gerald said, Son, I think we need to have a conversation in person. We are having a conversation, Marcus said. A private conversation, Gerald said. Without attorneys, without Serena. Serena is my wife, Marcus said. There is no private conversation that does not include her. Marcus. Gerald's voice had dropped into the commanding register, the voice of a man who has spent 40 years using the weight of paternal authority to close discussions he did not want to have. You do not understand the full picture. I understand all of it, Marcus said. I have had 3 months to understand it. I would like you to listen to me now. And Marcus told his father not what he knew. Gerald already understood what he knew, but what was going to happen. The civil suit would proceed. The federal investigation was active. Eleanor had cooperated. Connor had retained criminal counsel. The documentation was complete and airtight. Gerald's attorneys were going to receive the full discovery packet within the week. Gerald was quiet throughout. When Marcus finished, Gerald said, and this is the part Marcus repeated to me twice because it was the thing that mattered most to him. I did not intend for you to get hurt. Marcus said, I know. And that was the end of the call. Let me tell you what happened to each of them, because justice in financial fraud cases rarely arrives in a single dramatic moment. It arrives the way financial fraud itself operates methodically, inexorably, following the money trail to its correct destination. Gerald Holt was indicted by a federal grand jury on 6 counts, 2 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of money laundering, 1 count of fraudulent procurement, and 1 count of conspiracy. His attorneys negotiated for 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming $2.3 million in documented fraudulent transactions, an insider cooperation agreement from Eleanor and the civil suit's expert testimony connecting the billing fraud directly to the conditions that caused Marcus's accident. Gerald pled guilty to 3 counts in a negotiated resolution. The sentencing guidelines for the reduced charges produced a sentence of 31 months in a federal minimum security facility and a financial penalty of $1.4 million. Gerald Holt, who had built his professional identity on the ability to dominate every room he entered, spent 31 months in a room he could not leave. Connor received a separate resolution. His cooperation, which came late and partially after Eleanor's full cooperation had already established the factual record, earned him a deferred prosecution agreement on the conspiracy count and a guilty plea on a single count of fraudulent procurement. He received 18 months of supervised probation, a $250,000 penalty, and a permanent bar from serving as a principal or officer of any entity that contracts with federally regulated financial institutions. Connor Holt, who had spent his entire adult life working under his father's roof, was now legally prohibited from operating in the only professional environment he had ever known. Diane filed for divorce 3 weeks after Connor's resolution was finalized. The marriage had produced 2 children and 7 years of a social life built on the income of a family business that no longer existed in its prior form. The divorce was contentious in the way that divorces are contentious when the financial picture changes dramatically during the proceedings. Diane retained aggressive family law counsel and pursued a settlement that reflected the assets as they had existed before the federal investigation rather than as they existed after. She was partially successful. Eleanor's deferred prosecution agreement required full cooperation, mandatory financial counseling, and a penalty of $380,000, her total distributions from GH Capital Partners over the life of the entity. She complied with every term. She lives in a smaller house in Montclair, now the Holt family mansion, having been liquidated as part of the asset penalty proceedings. She calls Marcus once a month. He answers approximately half the time. They talk about his recovery and about nothing particularly important, and the call ends with her saying she is sorry and him saying he knows, and neither of them finding a way to fully bridge the distance between those 2 statements. This is, in my observation, the most honest version of their relationship that has ever existed. The civil suit resolved 14 months after Rebecca filed the initial complaint. The resolution came in the form of a structured settlement, Rebecca's preferred outcome, because the documentation was strong enough that the defendant's attorneys understood a jury verdict would be considerably more damaging than a negotiated number. The settlement figure is subject to a confidentiality provision, which means I will not state it here. What I will tell you is that it was sufficient sufficient to cover Marcus's past and future medical expenses completely, sufficient to fund the adaptive equipment upgrades his occupational therapist had identified for the next 5 years, sufficient to eliminate the financial pressure that the Holt family had been attempting to use as leverage for the entire duration of the recovery, sufficient to give Marcus and me the specific practical freedom of people who do not need to make financial decisions from a position of stress. We did not use any of it to move to a larger apartment. Our apartment, with its widened doorways and its grab bars and its east-facing window positioned with a compass, is exactly the right size for the life we are building in it. On a Tuesday morning in March, 18 months after Marcus's accident, I was sitting at the kitchen island with my coffee and my laptop when I heard the sound from the physical therapy space we had set up in the second bedroom. Not the sound of the therapy equipment, a different sound. I walked to the doorway and stopped. Marcus was standing, not in the parallel bars, not with the support equipment the therapist used during sessions, standing with one hand resting lightly on the windowsill for balance, looking out at the March morning over Manhattan's rooftops. He had not done this before. Not like this, not on his own, not without the session context, not just because he wanted to look out the window. I stood in the doorway and did not say anything. After a moment, he turned his head and saw me. His expression was the specific expression of a man who has done something that cost him every available unit of physical effort, and who is sustaining it through the quality of his attention rather than the quantity of his strength. "The light is different in March," he said. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. I had learned in 18 months to keep my voice steady. "You can see the water tower on the building across the block," he said. "I never noticed it from this angle before." "Come look," I said, and moved into the room. I stood beside him at the window. He shifted his weight slightly, redistributing the load from the windowsill to his own balance, and he looked out at March in New York, the specific gray gold of early spring, like the buildings doing the thing. Buildings do when the morning angle is right, and everything has a quality of possibility that is particular to that hour and that month. "The Meridian Tower is visible from here," he said. I looked. He was right. The upper floors of the building, the one he had been assessing when the scaffolding gave way, were visible above the mid-rise structures between us and Midtown. "Yes," I said. "I have been looking at it for 18 months, he said. "From this window, from the other window, from the chair." He paused. "I think I am ready to stop looking at it as the place where my accident happened." "What do you want to look at it as?" I said. He considered this. "The place where I found out what my family actually was," he said. "And the place where I found out what we actually are." I looked at the building in the middle distance, a structural assessment building, now the subject of a completed federal investigation and a closed civil suit going about the ordinary business of being a midtown commercial property while its renovation proceeded under new management with proper scaffolding. "That is a better thing to look at it as," I said. "Yes," he said. "I think so." He stood at the window for another 2 minutes. Then with the same methodical patience he brought to every structural challenge, he worked his way back to his chair. He was not ready to walk across the room yet. That was a different phase of the work coming in its own time. But he had stood at the window and looked at March. That was enough for March. I want to tell you about the foundation because it is the part of this story that I am most proud of, and it did not begin the way I expected. Rebecca Torres mentioned it first in one of our post-settlement conversations. She had handled enough construction injury cases to know that Marcus's situation, a worker injured by the foreseeable consequence of a fraud scheme whose injury might never have been properly compensated without the specific combination of a forensic accountant wife and an engineer husband who had noticed the billing discrepancies before he fell, was not representative. Most injured workers did not have that combination. Most did not have the resources to retain the kind of legal and investigative team we had assembled. There is a gap, Rebecca said, between what the law can do for construction injury victims and what the law actually does given resource constraints. I know, I said. I have seen it from the financial side. What would it take to address part of that gap? Rebecca said. I thought about it for several days. I talked to Marcus. I talked to David Chen. I talked to a nonprofit attorney who helped draft the organizational documents. The Holt Construction Justice Foundation, which is its formal name and which I chose deliberately because the name carries the history, provides forensic accounting services and legal referrals to construction workers who have been injured by conditions that may be connected to financial fraud or improper cost-cutting. We work with a network of forensic accountants, personal injury attorneys, and OSHA compliance specialists. We have completed 11 cases in the 2 years since the foundation launched. In 3 of those cases, we found evidence of financial irregularities similar to what David found in the GH Capital Partners structure. In 2 of those cases, the evidence led to criminal referrals. We are not large. We are not fully funded. We do not fix the gap, which is vast and structural and cannot be fixed by a foundation with 2 years of operational history. But we close 11 cases. 11 workers who might not have had the resources to find what was behind their accidents, who found it because we were there. Marcus manages the foundation's project intake. He reviews the structural documentation in each case because his specific expertise assessing buildings, identifying when something has been built below what the specifications required, is precisely what the cases need. He does it from his desk in the 2nd bedroom with the adaptive equipment and the east-facing window in the apartment where I repositioned the furniture and measured the window angle with a compass. He is very good at it. He was always very good at finding the thing that was wrong with a structure before anyone else knew something was wrong. Last Tuesday, I came home from work to find Marcus at the kitchen island with his laptop open and a legal pad covered in his specific, precise handwriting beside him. He was reviewing foundation case files, the detailed technical notes he makes on every structural assessment submission we receive. I set my briefcase down. I took off my coat. I looked over his shoulder at the case file on the screen. This one is complicated, I said, reading the summary. Very, he said. The scaffolding failure pattern is similar to ours, but the entity structure is different. It is going to require financial investigation to trace the procurement chain. Send it to David, I said. Already did, he said. He is pulling the entity records now. I stood behind him for a moment, reading the case summary. A construction worker in Queens, a scaffolding failure on a commercial renovation project. Injuries that were serious, but the doctors believed compatible with a significant recovery. A OSHA citation that characterized the failure as negligence without looking at the financial picture behind the negligence. the same shape as ours, a different family, the same gap that Rebecca had identified. "Serena," Marcus said. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." I put my hand on his shoulder. He put his hand over mine. Outside our kitchen window, New York was doing what New York does in the early evening and late autumn, the light going from gold to copper to the specific deep blue that arrives just before full dark, the buildings catching it and throwing it back at different angles, the whole enormous city in its ordinary magnificent motion. "You should not thank me," I said. "You found the numbers." "You knew what to do with them," he said. "We knew what to do with them," I said. He looked at the case file on his screen. Then he looked at the legal pad. Then he picked up his pen and went back to work. I went to start dinner. The numbers had told us the truth, the way they always do, patient and precise and entirely indifferent to what people prefer to believe about themselves. The numbers had told us what happened and who was responsible and what the correct response was. And then they had, in the way that the best investigations always do, revealed something that had been there all along, underneath the fraud and the injury and the reckoning. What we were building, what we were going to keep building in this apartment and in this city and in the work we were doing together for as long as we had the patience and the precision to keep reading what the numbers were saying. The numbers never lie. The only question is whether you are ready to hear the truth they tell.